I believe that Magisterium AI is probabilistic, irresponsible, and fake.
Fear tells us to delete. The church tells us to build.
The faith is apparently specified to a query with no one standing behind it.
We accept a mission to ensure that even in the AI and robotics age, our tools remain oriented toward the dignity of the human person. We built Magisterium AI to fix that.
Oh my gosh, dude, don't do it.
So you're saying it can't accept responsibility, and that's kind of core to your issue.
I am saying that, yeah.
The proposition to delete it is no longer just a critique of a tool. It's a refusal of a vocation. What matters is what the church is actually asking us to do. We didn't build it to replace the shepherd, but to help guide the sheep.
Uncanniness and weirdness, to be speaking with someone who isn't really there, to be asking questions to someone who doesn't listen, to be talking to no one, as it were.
Hello and welcome to the Faith and AI Project podcast. I'm your host, Edmund Mitchell, and today's episode is sponsored by the good people at PushPay. Are you a parish leader who's tired of sitting through stacks of notes, analyzing spreadsheets, or doing repetitive busy work tasks? Well, you were called to this work to reach souls, not to compute data. And that's why PushPay keeps innovating its tools for parish staff. When every soul comes into focus, ministry becomes more personal and more impactful. So discover how PushPay's AI solutions can help you reach people before a meaningful ministry moment passes. You can visit pushpay.com/innovation today to get started. And we thank PushPay for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Today we have a fantastic episode, a little different than the first few we've had. We saw an article by Marc Barnes of New Polity titled Delete Magisterium AI. And we had previously had on Matthew Sanders from Magisterium AI on the podcast. He's an advisor to the project. And we thought, let's get them both together and have a conversation. And this is really part of the mission of the Faith and AI project. We want to help people understand, navigate, and harness AI with wisdom, confidence, and hope. And I really think bringing people together that have diverse opinions and perspectives, but are also within the church and trying to navigate this new age of AI, I think it's really helpful. So I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. So enjoy the episode, but also we want to make this a learning community, having conversations with one another and discussing these things. So find us on social media and let us know in the comments what you thought about this episode.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Faith and AI Project. We exist to help people understand, navigate, and harness AI with wisdom, confidence, and hope. And today we examine a novelty of our age, whether the church's treasury of wisdom can be made more accessible by artificial intelligence without quietly training Catholics to relate to knowledge and maybe even to God, as though it were a customer service experience. Our interlocutors today are unusually well suited to disagree about this without having to pretend they're disagreeing. Matthew Sanders is the founder and CEO of Longbeard, the technology firm behind Magisterium AI, widely described as the leading Catholic AI platform. His work lives at the intersection of faith and engineering, and he's collaborated with various institutions, including the Pontifical University in Rome, and on projects aimed at digitizing and sharing the church's intellectual inheritance. In other words, he's one of those rare modern men who looks at 2,000 years of text and thinks not how heavy, but how searchable. Marc Barnes, by contrast, is a theologian by formation, a builder of communities by vocation. He's the editor of the New Polity magazine, and he's also a husband and father of three, which is relevant because parenthood tends to cure one of the great illusions of the digital age, that human formation can be accomplished primarily through better information delivery. Marc writes frequently on technology and gender, and he has an instinct, some would call it a gift, for noticing when a tool is quietly catechizing its user. To give some context, this dispute began with an article by Dr. Barnes titled Delete Magisterium AI, titled as that does not suffer from excessive nuance. His claim is not simply that this or that answer might be wrong, though he notes the probabilistic nature of such systems, but that the very form of the product is spiritually and culturally corrosive. And Mr. Sanders responded in a published reply that is, if nothing else, evidence that he does not wish to be a machine. He grants much of Marc's concern about the technocratic temptation, but argues that Marc's conclusion mistakes the tool for arrival to the church rather than an instrument in the church's service. So tonight, we're not adjudicating whether Catholics may or may not use search tools, or maybe we are. Maybe we'll have that conversation, but we're asking something subtler and therefore more dangerous, whether the chat format is neutral or inherently problematic, whether probabilistic systems can serve a tradition that claims certainty about what has been revealed. We'll try to keep this discussion friendly, which in our age simply means we will resist treating disagreement as violence. We'll also attempt an old-fashioned discipline to state the other man's argument well enough that he recognizes it. And with that, we will proceed to the modern world's favorite activity, a conversation about whether conversations with machines are conversations at all. And with that, Matthew, Mark, thank you so much for being here.
Wow, that was a wonderful introduction.
Thank you. I worked hard on it.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to become meta about this whole thing, but there's some real literary turns in there.
Oh, thank
Awesome.
you. Well, Matthew, Mark, huge fans of both of you, and just wanted to, at the top, before we'll get into, give both of you, 7 or 8 minutes to just give uninterrupted, time to just share your positions. But I just want to thank you both for being here and for showing up. Matthew, You're joining us from overseas, correct?
Yes, sir. I'm in Rome right now.
Awesome. Cool. Well, how do we want to decide who goes first? I think Matthew, or actually Mark, why don't we go in order of chronology of how this kind of played out? Matthew, if you're open with that.
Yeah, of course.
All right. It's fine by me.
Cool. And we won't, I'll kind of be the timekeeper in this and be interrupting every now and then, hopefully charitably. But Mark, with that, why don't you take us away?
Thank you. Yes, I believe that Magisterium AI is probabilistic, irresponsible, and fake. And I think for that reason, it should not exist. And I don't take this as something that is specific to Magisterium AI. I actually think this about all chatbots generally considered. I think there are a lot of things, a lot of concerns, a lot of fears about AI, but I just want to narrow in on these 3 problems. Because I think that they affect what I would call the daily or average user of AI chatbots most significantly. They just sort of hit home and don't require, I think, a lot of prediction or prophecy to understand. So I say that it's probabilistic. Well, what do I mean? Well, I mean that though it was described in your introduction as something enabling the searchability or a search tool, that what fundamentally distinguishes Magisterium AI and all chatbots from a search tool and something like even Google, although that's getting a little bit murky with AI responses through Google, is that the answers to queries are novel generations. So what appears to be the sentence in response to it is not something that anyone ever wrote. It's compiled on a sort of algorithmic probabilities to be what it is, to appear as it appears, which means that whatever it is, whether it's true technically or false technically or absurd technically, it's always only probably true, probably false, probably absurd, because the whole thing is only ever probable. Magisterium AI acknowledges this by pasting through various parts of its website's design notices, little signboards saying not to trust the responses of Magisterium AI or any AI generations, because one will never know if they're true for this reason. The very form of it's been helpfully described to me as a word guessing machine. So the LLM basically patterns, or it kind of places a pattern on a large body of text so that novel generations can be produced out of it. So I don't think that this is a fitting mode of catechesis. So catechesis is the specification of the church's teaching down to the individual, to the particular person, his or her particular query. And as such, I do not think it's fitting that something which is given to us with a great certainty should be specified with such great uncertainty. Or I would say even more, I don't think that something given in the mode of certainty, namely the Holy Catholic faith, given to us by Jesus Christ, who gives it in his person and as a real historic event. I do not think that this should be specified to the particular question, the particular query, in the mode of probabilism. That is, in the mode of something that might be true, might be false, and in any case, which no person is specifying. That leads me to the next point. I said it's probabilistic, and then I said it's irresponsible. Now, calling something irresponsible, I think can be a little confusing, because what I do not mean is that anyone involved in the creation of Magisterium AI has done anything but care deeply about the product they've produced, nor do I question their motivations. I'm not saying irresponsible in the sense of they are driving a car far too fast down a windy road. Rather, I'm being a little bit etymological here. Responsible shares this root, a Latin root from which we get words like spouse and response, obviously. And I think that's quite important. The idea of responsibility is that one is espoused or married to or vitally attached with what one says or what one does. When one is responsible for an act, one can always trace back the particular act or the particular words back to the person. This matters for the very form in which Christianity is presented, because with Magisterium AI, whether or not the sentence it generates is technically true, or whether the citation it generates is technically true or technically a good citation, there is no person who listens to the user's query, no person who speaks the response, no person who cites the magisterial document, and there's no one at the end of the day responsible for the generated compilations of Magisterium AI or of any other chatbot. Again, this is not a critique of Magisterium AI specifically, but as a chatbot. Again, this is acknowledged in the by Magisterium AI in the various signpostings saying not to trust it and to always consult a human when in doubt. But I don't think it's simply when we are in doubt that we should trust humans. But I think, I think that the giving of the faith, the specification of the faith in catechesis ought to be, and is fitting that it comes from a person, whether in writing or in speech. It's not fitting to the holy faith to have a probabilistic and irresponsible generation serve as the specification for the teachings of the church, because the church is itself a response to the reality of the person of Jesus Christ. It is based on the eyewitnesses, the apostles, who hand down what they heard and saw and knew to the first converts, inaugurating a chain of catechesis that goes all the way back to the Lord, such that we can say in truth that every link in that chain of which we are a part is someone touched by the Lord, which means that every specification of the faith, by which I mean any act by which someone says, let me explain what the church teaches, let me tell you about what Jesus wants, let me teach you, let me show you, that person always stands behind their word and always gives witness to the reality of Jesus Christ in the very act of specifying the teachings of his holy church. What Magisterium AI inaugurates is an age in which the faith is apparently specified to a query with no one standing behind it, no one to bleed for it, no one to fear reprisal for what it said, no risk, what I would characterize as no courage, because there is simply no one there to be courageous or to risk the specification of the gospel and to stand responsible for the words spoken. And again, I think this is ill-fitting, not because I'm worried that some crazy teaching will come out of these generating machines or something like that. I don't think that. What I'm worried about is that the very form of Christian witness will be replaced, and that we will raise a generation of people habituated to receiving the Catholic faith probabilistically and irresponsibly, and not receiving in that very moment of catechesis the witness to the truth and the reality of Jesus Christ who touches our lives. The last point I said was that it's fake, and I'll finish with this. When I say it's fake, I'm really pointing to a very general experience, a very basic experience of uncanniness and weirdness to be speaking with someone who isn't really there, to be asking questions to someone who doesn't listen, to be talking to no one, as it were. I think this because I believe acts have ends. That is to say, we act for a reason, we act for a purpose. And one of the principles by which Catholics live is to not do violence to nature. That is to say, to not take an act which has an end and try to orient it towards some other end. So I think the act of speaking with and listening to and conversation have as their end a person and communion with that person. Now, I think there's much that we can do with that, but I think that's fundamentally the end, the purpose of our ability to question, our ability to listen. And so I would describe the act of speaking with a chatbot, no matter what the content is, as an irrational act. And because of that irrationality, in which the act itself has an end which is not fulfilled in the act, where there's a violence done to the act, you see some of the fruits that we see today, namely the disturbing amount of trust that people put in AI generally, the frankly psychotic behaviors of people who grow to have companions in their AI chatbots, and who would trust to the probabilistic and irresponsible generations of machines over and against friends, neighbors, and families.
Thank you, Mark. I want to give like a 10-second warning time check.
And again, I guess I would just close by saying these are the reasons why I think that Magisterium AI should not exist, but I do not want that to be at all to cast any kind of aspersions on what I take to be the excellent motivations and the brilliance behind its creation. And I think that such both technical and spiritual brilliance and fervor, respectively, could be put to similar but different uses.
Thanks, Mark. Matthew.
Well, thank you. I really appreciated that, actually. So thank you, Mark. And I look forward to the subsequent conversation.
Yeah.
Well, before we begin, I want to clarify something. What I think about this topic, ultimately, it doesn't matter. In a time of confusion, our safety lies not in our own arguments, but in conforming our minds to the mind of the Church. And we must look to the Holy See for guidance on these new frontiers. It's in this spirit of fidelity that I ask you to listen to the following message from Pope Leo, which was addressed before Christmas to the Builders AI Forum, which was a gathering of Catholics to explore how AI could be used to support the mission of the Church. So these are the words of Pope Leo. I send cordial greetings to all participating in the Builders AI Forum 2025, taking place at the Pontifical Gregorian University. I express gratitude to the organizers and all who, through research, entrepreneurship, and pastoral vision, seek to ensure that emerging technologies remain oriented toward the dignity of the human person and the common good. This forum's aim of fostering a new interdisciplinary community of practice dedicated to supporting the development of AI products that serve the Church's mission reflects an important issue of our time, not merely what AI can do, but who we're becoming through the technologies we build. In this regard, I wish to note that artificial intelligence, like all human invention, springs from the creative capacity that God has entrusted to us. This means that technological innovation can be a form of participation in the divine act of creation. As such, it carries an ethical and spiritual weight, for every design choice expresses a vision of humanity. The Church therefore calls all builders of AI to cultivate moral discernment as a fundamental part of their work, to develop systems that reflect justice, solidarity, and a genuine reverence for life. Your deliberations over these 2 days illustrate that this work cannot be confined to research labs or investment portfolios. It must be a profoundly ecclesial endeavor. Whether designing algorithms for Catholic education, tools for compassionate healthcare, or creative platforms that tell the Christian story with truth and beauty, each participant contributes to a shared mission to place technology at the service of evangelization and the integral development of every person. Such interdisciplinary collaboration embodies the dialogue between faith and reason, renewed in the spiritual epic and affirming that intelligence, whether artificial or human, finds its fullness of meaning in love, freedom, and relationship with God. With these sentiments, I entrust the work of this forum to the loving intercession of Mary, seat of wisdom. May your collaboration bear fruit in an AI that reflects the Creator's design, intelligent, relational, and guided by love. May the Lord bless your efforts and make them a sign of hope for the whole human family. So that letter is the sound of the church door opening to the AI and robotics age. And in my opinion, we cannot claim to serve the church if we refuse to walk through it. The Holy Father has just told us that innovation in the area of Catholic AI can be understood as a, quote, participation in the divine act of creation, end quote. And that phrase should stop us in our tracks. If this technology is a reflection of the, quote, creative capacity that God has entrusted to us, end quote, then the proposition to delete it is no longer just a critique of a tool. It's a refusal of a vocation. I understand and respect the fear that many have. The desire to protect the faith from mysterious new forces we are struggling to grasp is reasonable. But having said that, we need to remember whose ultimate responsibility it is to safeguard the faith. What matters is what the church is actually asking us to do, and the church has just spoken. We live on a digital continent where confusion is king. When a seeker has a question about God today, they don't normally walk into a church. They type a question into a prompt bar. For too long, the only answers they found came from secular companies whose top priority is not fidelity to the gospel, to the Magisterium. We built Magisterium AI to fix that. We didn't build it to replace the shepherd, but to help guide the sheep. We built it so that when a digital seeker knocks, the door to the treasury of the faith is opened instantly and faithfully. The Pope's letter changes the entire landscape of this debate. He does not view this technology as something to be deleted. He calls it a, quote, profoundly ecclesial endeavor, end quote. That means this is church work. He specifically lists what we must build, quote, algorithms for Catholic education, end quote, and, quote, creative platforms that tell the Christian story, end quote. This is exactly what we're doing. There's an important difference between a personal preference and a church teaching. It's perfectly fine if you personally don't want to use AI in some area of your life, but there is a huge difference between saying, I don't like this, and declaring the church mustn't do this. The Pope clearly isn't asking us to stop. He's asking us to, quote, cultivate moral discernment, end quote. He wants us to build AI systems that are, quote, intelligent, relational, and guided by love, end quote. If we run away from this technology, to borrow a metaphor from the gospel, we are burying our talents in the ground. But if we listen to the Holy Father, we accept the responsibility to build. We accept the mission to ensure that even in the AI and robotics age, our tools, quote, remain oriented toward the dignity of the human person, end quote. Fear tells us to delete. The church tells us to build. Thanks.
I think you're muted, or else
Thank
you're just
you, Matthew.
warming up.
It was warming up. Thank you both. I would love for this next few minutes just to make sure that we clarify what each of our positions are. Marc, it seems that a lot of what you're saying is not so much that your concern is with AI as a technical tool, but with the simulation of personhood or conversation. Is that accurate, that that's kind of where the crux of this lies, is that a person is engaging with a tool that simulates personhood and, as you said, disrupts the end of conversation? And then the second question I have for you is this as Matthew said towards the end, the difference between I don't like this versus a moral imperative? Mm-hmm. Obviously delete Magisterium AI is a strong title, but is this a prudential suggestion, or is this something you feel is a moral obligation?
I believe it's a moral obligation. To your first question, yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about people talking with fake people. I think that's messed up. But again, my three main problems are that Magisterium AI is probabilistic in its generations and in its form, that it is irresponsible by nature, that is to say, there's no person behind the specifications of the faith, and that it's fake, again, by form. And in that last category of critique, that's where, yeah, I do think that having a form of catechesis which tempts people to relate to non-persons as if persons and to non-intelligence as if intelligence is bad. So you asked for what the crux is. I don't know. One of those three.
That's fair.
Now back to that second question. Do I think it's sort of a moral odd, or is this like I don't like this? I don't like it because I think it's a more. I mean, those two things are espoused in my mind. So I think the interpretation of that papal document is wild. I mean, the presumption you would have to make is that Magisterium AI is fulfilling what the Pope has asked us to do with AI generally, and that's precisely what needs to be shown or proven in this sort of argument. If you could replace what the word AI in that Pope's letter with chatbots, then you might have the kind of argument from what would we call it, the papal address that we're looking for here, but that's not at all what was said. The point is that in developing this broad technology that gets referred to as LLM technology, we have to do certain things. We have to make sure that it's in accord with the dignity of the person. We have to make sure that it's in accord with the common good. We have to ensure that the form of it makes us become something worth becoming and not gross grubs, like it seems to me we are, in fact, becoming through chatbots. And that's precisely what needs to be shown about Magisterium AI, and it's not, or it has not been. AI springs from creativity. Yes, that's true. It springs from our capacity given by God to make this world, to build it in a certain shape. We are called to make this world a pleasing temple to the Lord and a city of God. But it doesn't mean that any particular shape and any particular construction thereby has all of the sort of advanced approval of the leaders of this project, such as the Pope. One of the things I thought when I was thinking about the claim that AI springs forth from our divinely given creativity is, well, yeah, so do nuclear bombs, right? So do gas chambers. So do highways that blast through neighborhoods. Like everything we do comes from who we are, and we are rational creatures capable of building the world into a temple. And so the mere fact that something is being built does not sanctify it. It does not make it a good part of that project. We are capable of building a bad world that makes it harder to know that there's a Father who loves us. And that's, in the end of the day, what I'm claiming is happening when we turn to a probabilistic, irresponsible, and fake form of catechesis. And so I don't think that anything that the Pope said at all means that, well, we can just build this puppy because we have the papal stamp of approval here. Rather, we need to say, does this thing we're building actually serve the common good? And I'm arguing it doesn't. I hope that clarifies the.
And Matthew, it seems to me that your argument is not that AI or some of these systems are free of error, but that the the church and Catholics should not retreat or, kind of have an AI Benedict option where we hide from these things. But it seems like you're saying uh, the church Catholics have maybe a duty or at least a calling to show up in these places, to be present in these places, and where there could be better or worse AI or more virtuous and less virtuous uses of AI. Is that kind of fair to say of your side?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's easy to take issue with the fact that large language models are probabilistic. I mean, I take issue with the fact humans make a lot of decisions probabilistically a lot, right? And I think that's an important thing to remember. Now, I agree with much of what Mark has said, and I want to be clear about something. Ideally, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need AI to do evangelization or catechesis or facilitate formation, because everybody would be well catechized, right? We all have great parents who model the faith for us. We all have friends who support us. We have communities that rally around us. We have churches to unite us. So I think a lot of our approach has been pragmatic. But I want to clarify something about, just for people who don't know, how Magisterium AI works. Effectively, when you ask a question, it doesn't just generate an answer from its parameters. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid, because there are big risks with that. That certainly is, that's basically, for those of you who don't know how models are trained, if we think of like an ocean of everything that's ever been written, we're talking like over 20 trillion tokens. It's in vast amounts of text, 90% of it, which is just, really just garbage. These models emerge out of training on all of this data. And then they're usually compressed into, like, say, all that knowledge into 1 trillion parameters. And this would be for like state-of-the-art models today. That's a lot of compression, right? When you think about how much of that data set is actually really valuable and how much compression is happening, it has a very lossy understanding of what it was trained on. This is one of the reasons why when Magisterium AI came out, I was very concerned that so many Catholics were using it, because, frankly, it was hallucinating a lot, making things up. Now, I also knew, I like to think of myself as someone who's interested in human behavior. I also knew that I wasn't going to convince all the Catholics around the world to stop using AI. It's too convenient. So Magisterium AI started as a research project to see if we could mitigate some of the downsides of the AIs that are out there. Basically, try to address the issue of hallucinations and try to ground them. So effectively, everything they're saying is rooted in the fundamental doctrines and dogmas of the church. So when you ask Magisterium AI a question, there's a bunch of things that are happening. It's activating tools to retrieve context. It's basically searching a knowledge base, consulting the fathers, doctors, the popes, retrieving context that it thinks is relevant to answering the question. And then all that context is passed on to an AI, which reads it. And effectively what it's trying to do is distill all that wisdom and insight from human beings, from these great fathers and doctors, and put it together in such a way that it's a simple and intelligible answer with citations. So hopefully, if you see something that you find interesting, you can dig into the citations and go deeper. Hopefully, that will open you up to what the actual author has to say, and you end up benefiting more broadly from their work. That's effectively what we're trying to do. So it's not perfect, like any tool. Over time it gets refined and improves. But I do want to make a note that the probabilistic problem that we're currently confronted with, over time, these things will achieve higher degrees of determinism. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll be incapable of error. But I do think the ChatGPT that was originally introduced to the world has developed a lot since then. And we're starting to understand what causes hallucinations. And I expect that those issues won't be around for much longer.
I want a point of clarification just for my own, I guess from my own perspective. I'm partial to the topic of catechesis because it's something that I have a background in. So when people use the word catechesis, I think it's helpful for us to have some definitions here. Mark, do you feel that Magisterium AI is proposing or presenting itself as catechesis, that when people are engaging with Magisterium AI, that what they're doing is not it's not more similar to searching on Google. It would be more similar to asking a catechist a question about the faith.
Yeah. I mean, it refers to itself as I. So if you ask it something, it says, things that are kind of seem to be holdovers from the OpenAI's model. Things like, yeah, I'll check on that for you, or I can't respond to that, or I da 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 da. So in that format, it just simply is like asking someone a question and receiving a response, which I think is the foundational form of catechesis, or how we understand it, namely the specification of the teachings of the church to the individual, to the person. So I would like to be clear that when I accuse Magisterium AI of being probabilistic, I'm not accusing of it of hallucinating. Now, I think there's a sort of side question here, which is that if I don't understand the idea that we should allow something that does hallucinate to improve over time, and treat the church as a sort of dish for an experiment. We are not talking about a beta version that just gets better. We're talking about catechesis. The very fact that there's a year, 2 years of a thing that answers questions about the Holy Faith in the first person, and we're here saying that, yeah, it wasn't good for the first years, it was hallucinating all the time, is not some kind of like, it's going to get better in the future, and so that therefore makes that okay. That's irresponsible in the pejorative sense, not in the sense that I meant it. I mean, that's I can't imagine. Why would we do that? Why would we say, okay, yeah, it might be wrong. It might say something insane. It might distort, but let's put it out there because maybe it'll get better in the future. I mean, but even given that, I want to be extremely clear. I would have a problem with this thing if the only thing it did is correctly give correct sentences on the basis of one singular text. So say it's just the catechism, say it's just one encyclical, and that's the only thing that the LLM model is trained on. And the responses that it gives are 100% of the time, every single time, technically correct. The citation is correct. And that's it. And there's zero hallucinations ever. All right. That's the sort of strongest, argument, or not argument, but like non-existent example of of what I'm speaking about. I would still say that because the generations that it comes up with, because it is, there's no person who is specifying the faith, but the specification of the faith arrives from no one and only as probably true, right? With no guarantee, then that itself is a bad form of catechesis. And I think the experience people have with it is of a lack of reality, which is just what seems to me to be the most fundamental problem of the age, generally considered. We don't want more unreal things. We're stuffed to the gills with unreality. The whole world of the screen is collapsing, and there's no more trust involved in it. And the idea that now it's the time, just because we know we're not going to convince some people not to use AI, to make a Catholic version of this world, it seems to me to be uncreative in its scope. And I want to say one more thing, if it's all right with you guys, that the idea that there seems to be this idea that somehow we should not run away, and then we should not retreat, right? And this makes sense when we have established that the kinds of human actions that our technologies elicit are in fact good, right? Because then we can take this mode, which it seems like we're in, of we know it's dangerous, but we can't be scared. We know that there's risks, but we must be brave and take the risks. That mode works when the act itself is good. But if the act is evil, then we should run away and we should retreat. So to give an analogy, I would look at contraception. And the reason I think this is a good analogy is twofold. Number one, it is a technology, right? So it is to say it is a novel technology that became available to everyone in the form of pills, prophylactics, that disrupted an act from attaining its natural end. Okay, the act of sex has as its end the unity and of the spouses and the procreation of children, and contraception actually disrupts both of those in different ways. And it makes the act something fake, namely an act that the nature of who we are as persons is not being respected in the use of contraception. I'm preaching to the choir. I'm sorry, guys. But so what happened? What happened? A prohibition from the church, a runaway and a retreat. Okay. The other example that I would use is when the church banned the crossbow, but that didn't last long. So with yeah, you're out there hunting, aren't you? So the point here is that the act of contraception is bad, and so the call to retreat is not some kind of cowardice, but it's a great courage. A great courage because we should always avoid evil. That's the principle of the very first principle of the natural law. It's to do good and avoid evil. Okay. What happened though? It was not the case that Catholics, by virtue of obeying this prohibition, by virtue of not using this new technology, which everyone else was adopting, and in order to disrupt acts from attaining ends, it was not the case that somehow Catholics became like uncreative idiots. In fact, the very opposite happened. What happened is we developed natural family planning in a thing that had been virtually a sort of sneerable dice roll of like, yeah, you can have recourse to the infertile periods of the fertility cycle. Good luck. We think it's about 30 days. Instead, became a whole field of medicine, a whole field of healing through things like naprotechnology, and a way of knowledge for Catholics that has become the envy of the world, who are growing sick on contraceptive pills, even now. And now there's this way in which you don't even have to, it used to be the case that you had to sort of be embarrassed and saying things like, well, I know it's sort of old fashioned, but we have to obey the teachings of the church, and this is what we do, yada, yada. And now you approach the world and you say, no, we actually have found a better way, a better mode, not a better like version of the same, but a different mode that actually is in accordance with nature and therefore does not cause cancer and does not disrupt, marital relations and does not. Okay. So obviously that argument or that analogy hinges on the idea that there is a moral evil in each case, right? So if it's the case that the use of contraception is evil, the analogy would only hold if it's the case that talking to a chatbot is evil. I think it is. You guys don't. But but I don't think it's the case that we have any justification for presuming that a retreat is somehow not itself a creative response, that it's not itself a positive building up of the kingdom of God for the sake of what new things God wants to do in the world. What is the new thing that isn't talking to a fake person that the technology of LLM allows for? I don't know. I mean, I'm dull in these matters. But I don't like it to be characterized as something that we simply have to do. If we don't do it, we don't get involved in this technology, then it's just going to be sort of given up to the world. That's not the way.
Matthew, what would you say to that? And at this point, feel free, both of you, to interject with vigor. Don't feel hindered by my moderation. So, Matthew, what would you say to that?
I mean, yeah, certainly. I mean, I think, listen, what keeps me going is the dream of a house in the woods which I can kind of retreat. And in many ways from technology, from civilization. So, I think people opting for like a minute at existence, like that's kind of beautiful. And in many ways, I kind of find that inspiring. So I think people should be free to make choices that are most likely to lead them to the fullness of the common good. But for those of us who have to remain in the vineyard for a time longer, I think that it's just certain practical realities that necessitate sometimes using tools that maybe aren't ideal. Maybe there's better ways, but for the sake of efficiency, compromises are needed. Like I think about, like, for example, using Google Translate. Like, say you're taking a papal document and it's not available in your language, so you throw it into a translator. You want to read it in your own language, you throw it through an AI, which then translates it. Not ideal. Ideally, Polity would have released the translation in your language, and that way no nuance would have been lost. But I think most of us would agree that's better than nothing. And I think back to kind of Mark's first point. Listen, I do not have a PhD in theology. I spent a couple of years in seminary. The one thing I came to appreciate is just because you have an MDiv, it doesn't mean that you're not going to hallucinate in the field. You do. People do. Sometimes you may have good intentions, but you just, your recollection, kind of like with the LLMs, of what you were trained on back when you were in seminary becomes foggy.
No, I'm sorry. It's not the same. Hallucination is not error. Those are not equatable. A human being errs, right? Like, I put myself on the line and I get it wrong, right? And I'm responsible to that error and can be corrected as a person, right? A chatbot does not err. We use hallucination as a description because it's just there's no one who is making an error. There is no one who is responsible to the thing that's technically wrong. It's a generation of an error that you're not. I mean, part of the joy of the faith is that you can go out and be wrong and receive correction. You can go out and be wrong, and in being wrong, become ordered again to the truth. There's nothing like that when it comes to robots doing what they're doing.
Mark,
so it's not the case.
What if it was important to me, and for whatever reason, that I needed to have an answer that has really high probability is correct? And what if I know it's a really, really tough question to ask my priest, and if I just ask him to shoot from the hip, he's probably going to struggle with that. And so I decided I want to go to an AI because it has a higher likelihood of being correct, sometimes significantly higher. You're basically saying, if I understand you correctly, go to the person anyway.
So if you were in a position that there's an argument from false necessity there, because between the priest that you don't trust and the AI that you do, there's the ability to do research. There's the ability to look at the documents. I mean, often I think you guys seem to imagine that we're in a time where only 2 years ago have the documents of the church and the teachings of the fathers been made available in a digital fashion. Do you see what I'm saying here? Like, I don't actually think that makes sense as an argument.
No, it does. It does.
But I would say that if you somehow, I think if you somehow felt that like you couldn't talk with a priest about it and you had to go to the AI machine, I would still say that's a tragic situation, and that how do I put it? That fact alone is obviously does not justify the unnaturalness of the mode in which that sort of quantitatively perhaps more likely correct answer is given.
Well, what if, Mark, if somebody, and I'm not asking this, I'm asking this because I can generally say that this is a primarily one of the most popular ways Magisterium AI is used. What if someone was using Magisterium AI? They have an inkling that a father said something. They couldn't remember what father said it. And they know that Magisterium AI is a large knowledge base of the father's works. And they were hoping that it could search and retrieve something along the lines that I'm looking for. And effectively, Magisterium AI generates an output and points them to sources. Would you say that is a just use of Magisterium AI?
No, but I think Magisterium AI could be deleted and something else using a similar technology could be utilized. I mean, if you have, for instance, the same technology working so that a fake person says I and then generates a citation while generating a sentence that's probabilistically given, in order for you to be able to subsequently access the text, but instead just gives you the citations, then that would be a relationship to, still probabilistic in its form, but it would require the research of you, and there wouldn't be a, you wouldn't have the sort of unnatural relationship of talking with someone who doesn't speak as the form in which that research is done, which that research is communicated. It's not a very attractive use, though. I mean, because what I'm describing is what sometimes this thing gets described as, which is like a search function through the documents of the church. It's not a search function because it generates novel sentences that are not in the documents of the church. But if it was something like a search function, then yeah, I think you would avoid the moral opprobrium of talking with robots.
Well, just so people know, I mean, Vulgate is effectively built to do that. It's another product we have. Also,
it's awesome. Vulgate rules.
Also, just as a FYI, Magisterium AI does have an API which allows you to directly search across all of its knowledge base. And so, if you did want to avoid a chat experience, there are other ways to tap into the knowledge base. Just for the record.
But why are you insecure about it? Like if the thing is fine, then it's fine. Mm-hmm. And people should talk to the robot and hear its responses and follow its citations. But instead, there's like this, okay, be careful. We're putting out this technology here. Don't trust it. Remember, it can hallucinate. We got all these problems with it, but you're still going to put it out. And by the way, here's all the ways that we're really trying hard to make it not an experience of a person. It's like, well, what are we doing? Why are we making technologies that our faith is already at war at in the very technology itself?
Well, I think, Mark, internally, I mean, it did come up amongst our theological advisors at one point. There was a big discussion about it. But personhood has just never been something we've ever taken seriously because it's just obviously not a person.
It's totally obviously not a person. That's what makes it wrong to talk to it.
So, I think that I know there are other AI products that make more deliberate effort to simulate personhood. We make conscious design decisions to not. Now, the AI does still refer to itself as an I, so it does still use language, quite frankly, because when we tried to teach it not to use those persons, it was so awkward to read. The users just didn't like it. People can disagree about where that line should be. And I can say that's still an active conversation, ultimately within the company. But yeah, I'm just not convinced that I haven't seen evidence that people who are interacting with Magisterium AI are confused about whether it's a person or not. That hasn't become an issue for us. If it was, and if it seemed like people were developing odd attachments to it and stuff, then I would seriously revisit the way it currently interacts. But up to date, we haven't seen that problem.
Well, and let me say two things in that regard. I don't think that the morality of the act is related to what you think or know is going on, especially in this case. So what I mean is, to give an analogy, like it doesn't matter that Cicero didn't think the gods were real. Like the act of worship is still an act of worship towards them. And it's analogous. I'm not saying that Magisterium AI is like an idol or something like that. But I'm saying that to use it and in total savviness say, oh yeah, it's appearing like a person who's speaking with me, but I know it's not at all a person, right? Is to be correct. You're correct about that. And certainly it's good to not be under some wild delusion that you're talking with intelligence, which seems to be a belief that's really limited to the state of California. But that doesn't change the nature of your act. And you're still speaking with, you're still listening to, and the thing is still designed to appear as something that speaks with and listens to you for the sake, as you say, of a convenient and seamless experience that seems to work well. So it's just I'm making an accusation and it's unanswered. The accusation is that the act of speaking with, of listening to, is being utilized unnaturally and violently against the nature and dignity of the human person, who is not supposed to speak with and listen to non-intelligence.
On that one,
yeah, please,
Mark. So that I mean, so obviously I agree. It is unnatural, because it's not a being, at least not of the same order of nature that we are. That being said, one thing that was interesting what the Pope said, and he described intelligence, whether it be human or artificial. And I thought that was quite a fascinating statement. It seems to open the door to there being other forms of intelligence. Now, if you were at our Riddles AI forum and you were in the consciousness workshop, it was quite wild. So there's a lot of disparate views about that, whether that's even possible. Debates around consciousness and everything else. I have my own personal opinions on that. I'm not sure anyone really cares to hear them. But I think if you concede it, if an artificial entity can have intelligence, then I think it's fair that such an intelligence would find a way to communicate with us. And then the question is communicating with an intelligence which is artificial, is this just something wrong that we should just not do? And the Pope didn't weigh in on that one. And I'm definitely open to different views on that, but I do think it's worth thinking about.
I'm trying to understand your question. Are you asking that if it was in fact the case that an artifice was intelligent, would it then be okay to speak with it?
Yeah, actually. I can guess, Mark, what your answer would be, but I'm curious to hear what you think about that.
Well, yeah, the hypothetical is odd. I don't think that it could, because I think that intelligence is related to life. That is to say, the living thing provides a sort of foundational basis in the body for intelligence to exist. That's sort of describing it backwards. Obviously, metaphysically, we would just say that the intellectual form of the body, which we call the intellectual soul, forms a body for itself, and it's this particular body, right? So like the bodies we have are not accidental to the fact that we are an embodied intelligence, but rather the bodies we have are the form intelligence takes when it's bound to what we might say, bound is a tough word, but let's just use it, bound to an intelligent soul. So I don't think that an artifice could become intelligent outside of being a living body. I think it could only be possessed by an intelligence extrinsically. So whether that's going to be the kind of possession that we are currently about, namely that we various ways people who are intelligent operate in and through things that are non-intelligence to give them an appearance of intelligence. That's just our basic technological mode, or in the demonic mode or angelic mode, in which things that are not themselves intelligent are used for the sake of expressing an intelligence that isn't bound to that particular body. So like the demon speaking through the rock or that sort of thing.
A point of clarification just for the audience. It seems like maybe we're going back and forth between, I don't know what terms we want to use, but in the church document, Antiqua et Nova, I mean, it says in the paragraph, like, artificial intelligence is a misnomer because, it's human persons that have intellect. But then we also have in the science world, we call, plants intelligent in the sense that they like respond to their environment.
Sure.
So, maybe we just want to make some distinctions here about when I say I have a intelligent light system, or my light system is responding to something. It's very different than, Mark, what you're describing, which is like the intellect, which is specific to human persons. It's a gift from God.
Yeah, well, it's specific to persons anyways. I don't want to leave my guardian angel out of this.
Oh yeah, true. Fair.
But yeah, obviously it has analogous senses, right? And something can be called intelligence because it embodies intelligence. Like it has the effect of intelligence, like an intelligently arranged room or something like that. Obviously, yeah, analogously, a plant seems to be intelligent insofar as it shares a feature of what we take to be intelligence proper, which is the ability to respond as if from a center, right?
Mm-hmm.
An animal in that sense can behave intelligently, that it responds from out of itself to changes in its environment, things like that. But yeah, intelligence, properly speaking, is I've got like professors who are not here but are inhabiting the air above my head, listening for what I'm about to try to do, which is a little bit terrifying. But intelligence is to know things within oneself. And it's a participation in the divine mind. So that is to say, I know things, I know the essence of them, and I know them apart from an environment in which those things matter to my life. Like I can consider Neptune, I can consider a word, a number, I can consider things and have them in the mode of the knower within myself, apart from their impinging upon me, apart from them being a part of what I need to live, which is not true of anything else. Of the analogous senses of intelligence of plants and animals and such. And then what we understand that to be is a way of participating in God, namely that to know the essence is to be participating in God's idea of the thing in his act of creating it. So
Mark, there's one more thing I got to ask you. If, let's just say, in the case of embodied AI, right? So let's say you put a chatbot and you put it inside of a robot, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say that this particular robot / chatbot, this android, is basically performing the function of a medical doctor, and it arrives on the scene of a crime, and someone's been injured, and here it is, you're talking to this AI, and it's asking you questions and trying to console you and things like that. Would talking to that android be evil?
I think anything besides deliberately exploding that android would be evil. No, that's an exaggeration. Yes, I think talking to it would be evil. And I mean that objectively. So what I mean is that look, you could have as many real or hypothetical great results that come from doing human life in and through fake people. And I could accept all of the good results as good results. That guy was saved from a bullet wound by the android or whatever. But that doesn't make the thing good. And this is, I think, a fundamental error within the whole sort of Catholic technocratic sort of synthesis thing going on around here, which is that a good result somehow makes a good technology.
So in that for that argument though, let's just say because you don't want to basically use this thing for end justifies the means kind of thing. So if what I'm supposed to do is reject this interaction because it's evil, and I shouldn't choose evil even though it may bring about a good. Effectively, in this case, what you're asking the person to do is to die.
Oh my gosh. No, I mean, look, you can make good use of another person's sin. So like in a similar way that I can get
but the robot didn't sin. The robot can't sin. Only you.
No,
can.
but the many people who made
okay, I follow.
Life accessible and the goods of the world accessible in and through talking with fake people, I think have sinned. And so in a situation of necessity, if you made use of it, I think you would be okay.
So there's some hope. So there's hope for us. So let's say if I were to, start giving you testimonials of people who started a journey which resulted in them converting to Catholicism on Magisterium AI. Now, we're evil because we built Magisterium AI, I know. But in principle, those people who...
Not because you did, I think insofar as you do.
Insofar as we do.
That distinction is important because I think the thing is bad. I'm not saying the intentions are bad. I think intentions are really good.
No, that's true. That's true. I didn't mean to imply that. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think it's good for people to know, because I know there's a lot of them, right? Who, for whatever reason, they, we get this a lot. They just didn't know Catholics, or they didn't they didn't want to go into their church because they have social anxiety, in large part brought about because of this technocratic paradigm, right? Which is very unhealthy. And so they started, these questions with a chatbot. And that ultimately led, to them eventually connecting to a church and becoming Catholic.
And praise God for it.
Right.
It seems like what you're saying, Mark, is that it's if you could somehow, or is this what you're saying, that if you could somehow remove the simulation of personhood and maybe we wouldn't call it a chatbot, but an interface would give you the information, that then the use of an LLM would be permissible? Is that, because there are times where I go back and forth where I think you're saying it's just the fact that it pretends to be a person. But then there are other times where I think I hear you saying, no, it's not just that it pretends to be a person.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just go back to sort of how I started here. If the technology could be used as a form of catechesis that was not probabilistic, it was not fake, and it was not irresponsible, then I would want to then look at that technology. I'm not saying that, and therefore, because it's not bad, it's good, because that doesn't follow. There could be something else bad about it, but it would not have the problems that I have with it. Or sorry, you're not asking about my problems. You're asking about like the morality of the use of it itself. Yeah, I mean, if you could utilize LLM technology at any stage in the development of something, that the end result was not that I'm asking a non-person to give specifications of the faith that have no one standing behind them. I mean, it's true that if a chatbot to the answer of my question says that, God is love and he cares for you deeply, it's true that no one thinks that God is love and no one cares for me deeply. In looking at it, Magisterium AI, it sort of recommended some prayers that I pray, and it wished me sort of it gave me good wishes on my spiritual journey. Well, it's true, just to the facts of the case, that no one wished me well and no one recommended that I pray, right? And I think understanding that, like just like taking the defense of Magisterium AI seriously and saying, okay, if it's not a person, then I should be able to substitute every time where it seems like there's a person saying, or someone, as you have put it, reading, and remind myself, no one is saying, no one is reading. Then I think the kind of unnaturalness, which I don't think is like a unnatural in the sense of icky or weird, but unnatural in the sense of the acts not being related to their ends, which are proper to them by nature. Well, then it becomes kind of clear. No one is loving me. No one is wishing me well. No one thinks that Mary is the Theotokos, because those would all hold with the pronouncements of a chatbot, which is not true in how we've done catechesis up to this point, where there was always someone who believes, someone who bears witness to what is said. So just to this question about the testimonials, I mean, this is simple stuff. The ends don't justify the means. And even when the ends are amazing, it doesn't sanctify the means as a result. So conversion to the Catholic faith is always up and out of the world. It saves. So by definition, what it saves from is no good, right? The number one source of conversion, probably I would say in America today, is anti-Semitism, right? The people coming to the church are coming through Fuentes, right? I'm just on the ground. That's what I'm seeing. All right. I got off the phone with a guy in OCIA who's a Nazi, and he is pumped and excited to be a part of the Catholic Church. And he tells me in all clarity, he is excited because he wants to bring Nazism to the church as a benefit As this is
Boy, I do not envy that priest.
No, it's going to be a tough time. My gosh, poor guy. It's like, so how long do you have? Okay. Is it the case then that we get to say, okay, people are converting to the faith with stories that begin with anti-Semitism, and therefore we can't be afraid of anti-Semitism, but must embrace it. We can't retreat from it. We can't run away. Yeah, it's dangerous, but we have to do it in order to get the result. Of course not. No one thinks that. No one would ever say that. God is incredible, and he is so beyond our means when he's about his ends. Maybe that was a confusing way of putting it. He used a donkey in scripture for the sake of saving the Jewish people, and the donkey spoke. And I do not think that we should derive from that speaking donkeys are the technology we should be investing in order to bring people to the Catholic faith. He uses exile. He uses war. If you look at Europe, the truth of the matter is that I'm not saying in the spirit of every individual, but it is absolutely the case that Charlemagne's conquests of the barbarians spread the gospel in Europe. Just historically, that's the case. Now, what do we derive from that? Do we say, all this stuff about not spreading the gospel by the sword? Actually, if you look at the testimonial evidence, there's a lot of people who were saved because of the sword. And therefore, we should put all of our investment in swords and war? No, it doesn't make sense. That's not how we do things. What we do is say, is the thing good, right? And we praise God for any conversion from wherever it comes from. But we don't use conversion as a baseball bat to defend our technologies.
Mark, help me with this distinction. So let's say that and obviously we all know this is the case. My journey to conversion started with reading a book.
Yep.
Okay. And my journey to conversion started with talking to a chatbot.
Yeah.
Explain to me how these two things are different.
Well, distinguiamus, they're the same and they're different, right? They're the same in that the source is at some level the beginning of a chain of events that leads you to converting. And insofar as that's all we're saying, I think that the same thing could be said about a book that could be said about a chatbot. I mean, just use the Fuentes example. Fuentes writes a book. I don't know. Maybe he's done that. Then I would just say the same thing. It's like there are... Well, I mean, what is a technology? A technology is something that Ratzinger talks about as a response to human need. So the idea that some good comes out of a technology is just inherent to the word technology. We don't invent things that don't do things good. that don't do things we need, or at least perceive ourselves as needing. But in another sense, the book and the chatbot are different, obviously, because the book is vouched for. The book is, it leads back to the man, leads back to the author.
How is that different from Magisterium AI?
The pronouncements of Magisterium AI don't lead back to an author. They lead back to no one. The citations, sure, but that's not the machine that we've made here. We've made pronouncements that have citations. The pronouncements are probabilistically generated. The citations are evidence of what the thing is drawing on in order to probabilistically generate what it did.
So basically, it's just so I think I follow what you're saying. So let's say back in the old days, a monk was copying books, right? And so basically, when I'm reading that book, I know that book was copied by a human being, right? And
Sure.
that human being basically vouched that the copying he was doing is correct and he didn't make any mistakes, and it's all good. And so what you're saying, the difference here with Magisterium AI is that the copying or the distillation, whatever else, is being performed by a machine. And so so it can't vouch and say what I'm representing here is true, because effectively there's nobody home. So you're saying it can't accept responsibility, and that's kind of core to your issue.
I am saying that, yeah. And I think that the the book writing is a fitting form to the gospel and to the revelation of Jesus Christ because of what it is, right? Like, it's not like a technology that, there's a bunch of options. God could have revealed himself through podcast. He could have revealed himself through smoke signal, but he chose this particular time kind of arbitrarily. Well, we're going to write something. But because of the nature of the word, the word is an emanation of an intelligence that leads you back into the relationship with the intelligence, with its source.
Couldn't you say that, Mark? So let's say, I think this happens. If let's say ChatGPT says something evil, right, which leads someone to do something awful, right? I think many of us today believe that no, OpenAI, you're responsible. Your product said it, so you humans who oversaw its training and who said it's safe and ready to deploy are responsible. If the same kind of goes, right? So you're saying, like, at the end of the day, there's a human who's saying what I've just written is true, and I have not, it's a genuine reflection of whatever it is I was copying. And let's say that you have a company, or let's say that the AI scientists who train the model are saying, I've trained this model to accurately reflect the data that it's been trained on. Now, I'm not saying they do that very well right now, but let's say that we get better at that, and they say that I'm willing to state my credibility on it, that this thing is very good, is a very high reliability, and therefore you should use it. And I personally take responsibility for that. What would you say to that?
Two things, I guess. One is the difference there is responsibility is extrinsic to the words in one case and intrinsic to the words in the other case, right? So if I don't know the analogy, if there is a good one in this regard, but I might take responsibility for like what my kid does, or like, and the things he writes in an extrinsic fashion, right? But I don't take responsibility for it in the same sense that the kid himself takes responsibility for it. Like, the word that the kid writes down is what he wrote. It itself is responsible to him as he is responsible to it. That's why I wanted to bring up that kind of spousal relationship between word and the bearer of the word, the person. So what I'm saying is that when you read a book, the responsibility is intrinsic between the author and the work because it's his work. Whereas in the generations of AI, there's no intrinsic responsibility to the author, because the generations have no author. They're not even sentences, actually. I don't think the words are words in a strict sense. But now there's a second order of things that says, okay, well, are we responsible for the child in that sense? And is the company responsible for the machine it produces? Yeah. But I don't want that to be confused with that intrinsic responsibility. When you receive catechesis, the particularization of the church teaching, then the sentence you receive, I'm arguing that the sentence you receive should be a responsible sentence. I'm not saying that you should get irresponsible sentences that extrinsically have some kind of that somebody has some relation of responsibility to. Maybe
basically that the human wrote the sentence, and therefore the human can intrinsically take responsibility for it because they directly.
I don't even think that he can take responsibility. I'd say he is responsible for it. Like, it is an effect of which he is the direct cause, and the cause in the effect. So, but even if we just okay, well, why not have just irresponsible generations in the way I'm describing it, but then we just take responsibility for them? Well, I don't even think that's possible. I mean, the whole idea of
By the way, Mark, all of OpenAI's lawyers just breathed a great sigh of relief. Just FYI for them.
Well, I mean, it's not practically possible. You can't govern that amount of crap. I mean, you're talking about, going overnight, in technological terms anyways, going overnight from people looking for answers and finding things that people wrote. Largely SEO writing is like robotic people, but whatever, let's just say it's all people writing things, to billions of generated responses that are unique in every case and are occurring at a rate that there's no saying like, well, I take responsibility for all that. Well, what you mean is you can be sued in this case or the other case. But the idea of taking a sort of responsibility for the whole is actually impossible to the technology. Now, I'm not making a moral argument there. Maybe it's okay to make, I mean, look, the world is full of very intricate social technologies that no one could possibly take sort of individual or personal responsibility for. That's obvious. So I'm not like against that per se. But I think we should acknowledge it. Like that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about something that we can, adjudicate or step in or say, the machine got this part wrong and I'm here to show you that. And that's not, the thing is unleashed. It's unleashed both in how it responds and in its pure, just numerical spread across the world. I mean, it's out there doing what it does.
I want to talk briefly about what I'm hearing as, and I'm giving myself away as not the best or most impartial moderator. And I want to be clear, both Mark and Matthew, like leaving out Luke and John here. It's weird saying Matthew, Mark without them.
Oh my gosh.
But
I didn't think about that.
I am open to being convinced either way. Like I am not coming as one that's like has strong opinions strongly held. It's strong opinions loosely held. But what I'm understanding, well, one thing is that if one kind of like note that I keep thinking is that the catechesis, like to me, what's a weaker argument, and then I'll get to the really strong argument. A weak argument is that like catechesis is the catechism says the effort of the church to make disciples, and the church document says the primary catechesi tradendae on what catechesis is. The primary aim of catechesis is intimacy with Christ. So, I wouldn't call what is happening when someone's interacting with AI or even Google search as catechesis strictly, right? Like in the same way that if I ask an atheist who works at a Catholic church whether or not the Catholic Church believes abortion is a sin, when they give me an answer, I'm not under the assumption that what is happening there is catechesis, right? In the strict sense of that word. Like they're repeating information back to me, and the information is not catechesis, it's intimacy with Christ, right? But be that as it may, it seems like what you're saying is, and this is where I think the stronger argument is that if you're interacting with something that is presenting itself as a human, if I, the person interacting, am trying to have a human interaction with a non-human, that's where this becomes immoral. You're frustrating the end. But if the end is just to get information and I am under no confusion about whether or not this is a person, the question is like, is that immoral? I think one of your strongest arguments that's really stuck with me actually comes from interview or a conversation you had with someone else where you described a person bowing in front of a rock. And this was a great analogy. You said, if you come across your friend who's seems to be bowing and worshiping in front of a rock, and you say, what are you doing? And they say, oh, this is just something I do. And you say, well, it looks like you're worshiping this rock. It doesn't matter. There is something going on that's not good. Regardless of if that person knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that they're not worshiping the rock, there's something about the act. And there's something about putting yourself in a situation where you might be tempted to confuse the rock with a god, and your example of Cicero and things of that nature. So I think like that part of the conversation is what really interests me here. And I think people listening to this conversation are going to say, people untrained in moral theology and these things are going to say, really, at the end of the day, what is the difference between paperclippy in Microsoft Word who says, it looks like you're writing a hostage note, a ransom letter, do you need help with that? If I say, no, thank you, Clippy, is it better or worse in the way that I interact with it? Is it better or worse that this thing presents itself as an intelligent being? Would it be better or worse if it wasn't paperclippy, if it was Susan who's pretending to be a person? That's where I feel like the conversation really gets interesting, is like, is it wrong for me to place myself in context where, even though I know, or even I train my kids or teach my kids, this is not a human person, there's something not prudential in placing myself in context where this environment presents itself on a consistent basis that it is a human person, because it might lead me to start interacting with it in some way as if it were a human person, instead of knowing that this is, no different than Alexa or an atheist or Google search. Does that make sense to both of you?
Yeah. I'm against Alexa, to be clear. Actually,
me too.
Actually, she's worse.
Yeah, she's way worse. But does that make sense, Mark? I think that's where I'm more interested, is like, it sounds like what you're saying is it's intrinsically evil to type text into a box where something is pretending to be a person. But if we all agree this isn't a person, it seems like that argument has some holes there.
Well, okay, let's take it one step at a time here. I would like to start in responding to this as just to kind of frame it within the discussion of Magisterium AI, because I think it's just not the case that Magisterium AI is some kind of like carefully impersonal chatbot. Like the guys put vocalization on it, and you get to pick whether it's a male or a female voice that speaks to you. So the idea of this as being like, a restrained thing that doesn't have any kind of tendency towards emphasizing the non-person as person just doesn't seem to be true about the product. Now, about the kind of hypothetical that we're discussing, I guess I could just run through this as best I can. You present believing that the thing is a person as the consequence, and then you're presenting it as if the only thing to worry about is if you attain that consequence. Like if a person gets to the point where they believe that Alexa is a girl talking to them, or believe that Magisterium AI is a very kind cleric answering all their questions, then we have the bad thing. And we would all agree that's the bad thing. But since nobody thinks that Alexa is a girl, or that Magisterium AI is a nice cleric, but everyone thinks that there's some mysterious mechanism which produces sentences, then we're in the clear. And the only thing that kind of adjudicates is the consequence, right? Which is belief in what to call it, the belief in a non-existent person as actually existing as a person, something like that. And that's where I would say, no, I think that's not true. I think your acts themselves are related to other persons by the nature of the act, not by the nature of the consequence of the act, right? Though, of course, I think there's a connection. I'm not saying these are just like bizarrely disconnected things. So maybe I could put it this way, that speaking with and listening to and designing a machine that appears to speak with and appears to listen to, the kind of combination of user and the thing used, the tool, as it were, the tool has been designed to be operated in and through acts that should only be directed towards persons. And it's those acts that I think are bad. Because they're... Okay, so maybe an example...
And what you mean is not typing. Like typing in Microsoft Word is not conversing.
Yeah.
And what I'm
like, I
doing
don't
is
think so.
I'm typing a conversation. Conversation should have as its end another person.
Not should have as its end, as if it's like you have this thing called conversation, and then what you ought to do with it is directed towards persons, but the nature of the act is directed towards an intelligence. So you speak in order to be heard, which means that the act of speaking contains within itself the positing of a one who hears. So too with listening, you listen not abstractly, but you listen to understand. And so the very act of listening to, within itself, it posits one who can be understood, that is to say, an intelligence. Now, look, the maybe the analogy here is because sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're not, because I think we would all admit we're in a lot of new territory, and but if let's see, if I yeah, analogies are really hard here, but
I don't think you need an analogy, Mark. I think what you said is clear. I mean, I think that the consequence of what Mark is saying, which I understand, is we'd have to throw out language UIs, kind of period, kind of full stop, and there'd be a real question when I say language UI. I think most of us think we shouldn't be able to talk and then have a refrigerator talk back and say, "Is there milk in the fridge?" I should, It shouldn't really be talking back to me and saying yes or no. That would be weird. And and I think that then the argument is typing even to a machine. I mean, most people don't realize. I mean, Google has had AI under the hood for a long time.
Sure.
So effectively, if talking to any kind of language UI is not good. Now it didn't used to spit out text. It spit out blue links and information. But effectively, what's going on there is there's an intelligence in quotation marks, which is sort of trying understanding what I want, and it's going and retrieving information, and it's curating intentionally what it thinks is most likely I'm going to engage with. I think that's what concerns me is effectively I don't see the world being on board with throwing out language UIs.
No, and I don't think that's true though, because I think language is not the same as the act of conversation. Obviously, you use language to converse. But let's take a basic example. Like if I have the lights in this studio and I develop some sort of system where I say off and they turn off, right? I do not, in that use of my word, I do not speak so as to be listened to, and nor is there anything about that relationship that would suggest that in the act. And that's because speaking can be used as signs and as prompts all the time, right? So like I can scream, run. Sorry, maybe that's a bad example. I do want to be understood if I'm screaming run. So I can utilize language. I can vocalize. I can type things in ways in which the effect of it does not require me to converse with anything, and it does not getting the effect does not appear in any way to be like someone listening to and responding, like someone saying something new in response to the question I've given them or something like that. So Google is a good example, and perhaps it would be fruitful to think about this in reference to like a possible Magisterium AI. To give a search query, it's obviously to use words, but without positing that there is someone who understands my words or listens to them. Rather, even though the system by which a response or a result is generated is mysterious to me, it's not presented as a speaking with something and that thing listening to me and generating a novel response. Rather, it's a mysterious in some ways, but ultimately mechanical search function. That's and I mean that not simply in how it operates, but in its actual presentation. Like the result of Google is transparently mechanical.
Oh, okay, that's helpful. So basically what you're saying is it's not the intelligence that you have a problem with. I mean, and again, I'm putting that quotation marks, but the intelligence that I'm interacting, that's actually facilitating getting what I want, right? Whether it be the milk from the fridge or the answer from Magisterium AI. Your issue primarily is the fact that it's choosing to respond in language, which you think is really something that only a human being should be using when interacting with each other.
Well, not language, but that there's conversation, right, Mark? That you're saying like conversation is the difference here, not.
Well,
right,
I guess that's,
language can be a result, right? Like, I can, if I search in Google and say a basic keyword analysis brings up a list of probable results, and I select from them, I have used language, right? But I have not conversed with anyone. And nor has there been any positing of someone either in the design of Google as it elicits my act, nor in my use of Google as I perform it. That's not the case with Magisterium AI. It's not the case with chatbots. And a chatbot prompts you with a sort of like, what can I help you with? And then you start to respond to it. You have been addressed as a you, and you are then directing questions, the answers to which are not simply things that could be retrieved as information from a source, but which are novel generations. And that is the form in which we speak and listen to people.
Mark, let me ask you this one. This one is just interested. Let's say that you had a humanoid robot in your house. And I'm talking like, let's say this, if Elon gets his way.
Mark hates imagining humanoid robots in his house.
And I can imagine in a few years. So there's a humanoid robot. Okay. Now let's say that for the reasons that you've stated, I don't want to do something bad. I don't want to do something evil. So I might deactivate its ability to respond to me in language. So it's around and I bark orders at it and it complies. Would you be okay with that?
No. Now let me think why. I mean, there's a lot going on there. I don't think that robots should be made in a humanoid form, period. I think our bodies are sacred. And I think that the humanoid form is a result of the intellectual soul. So Aquinas takes up this question where he says, he's talking about the body, and he's saying the human body is perfect for intelligence because it is, I mean, he has ideas that we might quibble about, but he says because it is perfectly temperate, right? It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's perfectly receptive. It's not covered in fur. Like its ability to sense is amazing. So he gives the hypothetical, what if we gave a wolf an intelligence? And he says, this is in Contra Gentes somewhere. He says it would take the body of a man. Like it's hypothetical, but like to give an intellectual soul to a wolf would mean that the body of the wolf is not the body of a wolf, it's the body of a man. This body is the result of the intellectual soul. This is what comes out of the union of intellect with matter. Okay, so that's would be a problem I have, is that I think that illusion of intellect is present in the mere building of a thing that looks human. And I think the relationship to it, if we were honest with ourselves, would not be one of mere mechanics and results, but it would be like having a dumb, mute slave to order around. And this was very obvious when people first started chatting with ChatGPT and the various initial options, that the reactions of people to being given the ability to talk to a non-person were sort of, they were varied, let's put it that way, but they had these obvious strains towards abuse, like make fun of this dumb thing, try to make it into a Nazi, reveal it to be stupid on the one hand, And then there was also the kind of maybe more predictable, like, make it talk dirty to me, which, as we know, they're going all in on that, boys. So we get our slaves at last. But I think it is actually a problem of creating appearances of persons in any form that are in fact machines totally given towards our orders or our commands. I do not think it incites what's best in man. But I think okay, but that's not a critique of Magisterium AI. That's my like doomer looking forward to the future kind of problem. So I don't want to get that confused.
No, but it's actually, I mean, it's relevant, Mark, because I mean, effectively, our end game is, for those, you guys have probably all seen the movie Iron Man, right? So we all know Jarvis, right, which is that disembodied intelligence. So that's effectively that's what this project is meant to culminate in. And
gosh, dude, don't do it.
Yeah. So this is why I bring it up, because I do think I'm interested to hear your perspective on it.
Iron Man? I have a lot of thoughts.
Effectively, the reason that we feel it's worthy of doing is that we think it's inevitable that people are going to have AIs integrated to all kinds of aspects of their lives. What kind of bothers me, what motivates me to make sure that there's a version of Jarvis, which is aligned to the faith, understands it, and will ensure it's not going to give advice or whatever else, or options for things the human should choose, which are misaligned, is that if we don't ensure that, then effectively they won't have the option, and people are going to opt for it, and of course that's going to lead many people down, I think, a dark path.
Mm. Yeah, it's also a strong argument, or at least, I mean, it's definitely something to give pause, like the phenomenon of, I remember the other day, my son, we were watching a YouTube video of the Boston Dynamics, and the robots are trying to make their way somewhere, and someone comes up and like kicks this like dog looking machine, and my son goes, "Oh, I feel bad for the robot." And like, it kind of gives us pause. It's kind of what you're saying, Mark, like the fact that you would maybe even have that, like whether or not you believe it has dignity, or it's a person or whatever, like the fact that you even have that impulse to feel bad about how you interact with a chatbot should
there's something really to that, though. I mean, like if you think of Westworld, right? I know that not everyone's seen that, but
yeah,
the whole idea of there's a park where I go and there's a bunch of robots there, and they look like us, and I go there, I live out my fantasies, or fantasies, whether they be dark, right, in which I'm killing these things, effectively abusing them, or I live up my kind of heroic fantasies. I think it's obvious to anyone who watches that show that even though that thing's an android, it's in a human form, and the fact that I'm killing it and abusing it isn't good for me. It's bad for my soul, right? So I mean, whether I actually think it's alive or not, this is just bad. And I think your son's instinct is a very healthy one, right? This thing is, the Boston Dynamic robots, for the most part, have 2 arms and 2 legs. And they're bopping around, right? They have a similar form to us. And so, of course, if some, and by the way, those videos really bother me too, and they go and kick the friggin' thing, right? I mean, and it struggles to stay on its feet. It just doesn't feel good. And I think that's natural. And I think that's a very good sign. Which, and I agree, Mark. I think there are real risks to creating robots which look like us, because I think it's so innate in us to anthropomorphize these things. Some people anthropomorphize cars. So I mean, if we start putting hands and legs on things, it's irresistible, right? I do think that has to be considered very carefully, and that's why there are some companies which say we shouldn't make them humanoid, right? Maybe they have arms and legs because they have to effectively perform some function, but nobody would look at that and say, that definitely looks like some kind of android of some kind, right?
Yeah, sure. But I think what's most human in us is the intellect. I mean, that's the human act par excellence. And so, and like I say, the body we have is a consequence of the kind of being we are, namely ordered towards the contemplation of God. And so from which we then are described as intellectual creatures, because we are ecclesial creatures. We are divine creatures. We are for God. We can know him. And so I don't think that you get away from that creation of a fake person for whom the normal response, or the normal empathy and conscience and sense of dignity somehow no longer applies when you make something that doesn't have a body, but it's just a voice. It's just a female vocalization of text that's spontaneously not spontaneously, probabilistically generated. In fact, I think it's worse in the sense that it's more akin to an appearance of the person than the body, than the legs and the arms and the face. And I think that we've had enough of that fake stuff, and I think that we should move in the other direction. You said that it's inevitable. So, okay, it's inevitable. Everyone is going to talk with and listen to probabilistic generations.
In fairness, not everyone. There are the Mennonites and those who choose that lifestyle, just to be clear.
Well, no, I mean, there's already the Catholics. Like, it's inevitability is like it's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. If you act like it's inevitable, then it's inevitable. Sure, but that's just a way of abdicating your own freedom. I can easily imagine the Catholics becoming ultimately not just known, but admired for not talking with fake people in a world of people that talk with fake people. I can see massive evangelical potential, if we want to be sort of consequentialist about these sorts of things, to the church respecting human dignity so much that they will bear no imitation.
But do you worry, Mark? Let's say someone professionally. I mean, because what I worry about this is okay, I won't use the word, I am going to use the word inevitably. Companies are going to start requiring higher and higher efficiencies, right? Because effectively we're going to be competing more and more with AI and robots. Now, regardless of how we may feel about that, I do feel that that's inevitable. So the people that want to stay in the workforce are going to find it harder and harder to get those jobs, and they're going to be asked to basically interact with machines more and more and more. And let's say, on a principled perspective, I've decided that I will not talk to language UIs and I will not talk to androids, which effectively would exclude me from a particular job. If I felt that I was uniquely provided with gifts to make a contribution in that way, I felt I was called to work in, let's say, robotics, which required me to use these technologies to be productive in order to have the job. Basically, what you're asking is for them to reject that opportunity in favor of what?
Do I understand the principle to be that if we live as Christians, we should do so in a way that doesn't cause us to suffer?
No, so suffering's par for the course. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to suffer, and the suffering of, and in fact, I can think of perhaps this is a male thing, but I can certainly think of fewer sufferings that would be harder to bear than the inability to use your talents, or that's the feeling of being thwarted, the impotence.
But the consequent, Mark, if you're saying no Catholic can now participate in the next, basically what the economy is going to effectively become, at least 90% of it, there's going to be consequences for that, because effectively what you're saying is that Catholics, frankly, no longer have a presence. We're not part of boardrooms. We don't work on factory floors. We're no longer lights in these environments anymore, because frankly, we've decided to opt out and basically live as Mennonites, which again, I find appealing in many ways. Look, I do think that would be, I think I feel like a lot of people, even the church, would really struggle with that radical of an approach.
There's just so much to say. So, okay, let me think about this.
And I do want to say time. Yeah. We are running close on time, and I want to get to two questions from the audience.
Okay. Well, then I'll try my best to keep it brief. Number one, I think that it's just not the case. It's factually not the case that the kind of all-consuming use of AI is the economy, and that we're essentially going to the choice is between the Catholic versions of the same and irrelevance. I think that's a false dichotomy. I think that's a result of the AI bubble brain that cannot see the obvious signs that this thing is not producing a lot of value. This thing is living on government support, and this thing is not the real economy. Now that's an economic argument, and it might become from the fact that, here in Steubenville, Ohio, nothing that we need is being provided by AI, but we still need to have innovation. We still need to have entrepreneurship in order to start new businesses and grocery stores and fix buildings and build up community. Like, the real world is there, and it matters, and it is ultimately what fulfills people, not the world of the screen. So I don't think there's some kind of inevitability to, like, you either, well, like, you could describe what you said with just as positive instead of as negative. It's like, what if Catholics become the people who hold the real world dearly and are known for it? In we're acting as if like it's this novel thing where suddenly the making Catholic versions of every new technology has been the story of the last 100 years. It's not like some potential future where now we have to make this decision. We did it. We did it with radio. We did it with television. We've been doing it on the internet. We have been trying to be, to make the Catholic version of the same has been the modus operandi of the American church anyways. And the result has been abysmal failure. The result has been that it's overseen the same period of secularization and decline that we all are so familiar with. So I don't understand why it's the case that we think now the same thing, which is like adopt and make a Catholic version of the same technology or become totally irrelevant, which is exactly what we said about radio. It's exactly what we said about television. It's exactly what we said about the internet, is now somehow a totally new field or a new question. I think that the time has come for creativity whereby the church becomes the patroness and the mother of the real, as opposed to the fake world, the increasingly fake world that the world obsesses with. Do I like that this is the time where there needs to be a distinction in form and not just in content? No, I guess I would like to live in a time when, we could just imagine it's all the same. I don't think that's what we're living in right now. I think we're living in a time when reality itself, the idea of things being responsibly done, books being written, people vouching for their acts, words that come from people and not from generations that can't be held to account, that this is the world that people love. It's the world that's being mined for the effectiveness of the machines. And it is the world that the church ought to stand up as the proud guardian of, and we should not say that that's some kind of enclave, some kind of Mennonite option that would make us irrelevant. On the contrary, I think it would make us heroes.
Matthew, I want to limit your response to under a minute so we could wrap up with a few rapid-fire questions.
I think Mark, I asked the question, he answered. That's fair.
Great. We had a few audience submitted questions. Going to go with ones that would be relevant here. One person asked, what do you both imagine? And they said AI, but I think based on our conversation, we might say a large language model. What do you imagine a large language model that fully supports human dignity looks like? Mark, I think you had said that you could imagine a large language model might be or might not, but maybe both of you, and feel free to just say this is not possible, but if I could give both of you just a minute or two to respond. The question is, what do you imagine a large language model that fully supports human dignity would look like, if that's even possible?
Well, I don't think it would look like a chatbot. I think what's really, really impressive and should be admired about LLM technology is the ability to put a pattern over an extremely large body of data that no one intellect, and not even a group of intellects, could deal with as data, right? Who could sift through, et cetera, et cetera. So I know some guys working in like the field of X-rays, for instance, where it's like you can arrive at a admittedly probabilistic result through the patterning of a, I don't know how many millions, let's say, of images, and then through a query and a prompt. Obviously, and since you're asking about my ideal, I obviously would hope that this, whatever this thing is not named Jessica, and it doesn't like, blow you a kiss once it's given you the result. But like, for the result to be given, and then for the person who utilizes that tool to have the ability to judge the probabilistically generated result in relation to the case at hand, without any language, sorry, I shouldn't say language, without any conversing with, without any listening to, without any positing of a intelligence or a center out of which novel sentences are cobbled together or anything like that. Now that could be, I don't need to say that as a hypothetical. I think that's happening. There's good work happening. And it's happening in fields where large bodies of data are the material, as it were, on which people are working.
Great.
So something like that.
Thank you, Matthew. What would you, obviously you are imagining, but how would you describe an AI or large language model that fully supports human dignity? What would that look like?
Well, I think if all we're doing is looking at the outputs of LLMs, and so, and I'm determining whether the LLM is respecting human dignity based on what it says, I just find that woefully insufficient. I think if I was going to have confidence that an LLM truly was aligned, right, with the idea of always ensuring human dignity, I'd want to know what's going on in the black box. So there's a field called mechanistic interpretability, where they're trying to understand how the LLMs are thinking through these things, right? And that way they can be sure when it generates an output that the actual process which it even thought and considered the particular case it's reflecting on was basically reflecting what in our case would be the mind of the church, that it's thinking along the lines we want it to think. And so this is why increasing levels of determinism in collaboration with greater observability, just field of mechanistic interpretability, is really important to me. So ideally, an LLM which is really advancing human dignity in some way, or at least can provide insights in relation to human dignity, would be one that we could know for a certain how it processes information, how it's arriving at its conclusions, and as well as taking a look at the generated outputs to attest their alignment.
Great. We also had a question from Andrew Berry, friend of the show. We have an episode with him coming out. He's worked at and with Meta and Google and places like this. Really intelligent person. And he says, where does responsibility lie for user-generated AI experience? We touched on this a little bit, but if you had to summarize or answer this question, he says, where does responsibility lie for user-generated AI experiences? Is it with the model creator, the app builder training it, the user, the people who form the user spiritually, et cetera, policymakers, he also mentions. How would you guys answer that question?
I'm happy to go first. I mean,
sure, go for it.
I mean, all parties, to be perfectly frank. The person who prompted the machine is responsible. The person who created the machine, I think, is also responsible. And I also think that our regulators are in part responsible. And let me give you an example. If obviously I'm not a fan of AI technologies being used to generate pornography, right? And so if somebody goes to a bot and they're going there with the intention to generate pornography, obviously I would say that they're at fault. I think the person who permitted the AI to be able to do that, I think is at fault. And frankly, if there isn't laws in place which forbid people from being able to do that because it's bad, then I also would fault the policymakers. And of course, we who elected the policymakers who are supposed to be looking out for our best interests. And so that's where I would say we too are at fault.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think a chatbot is objectively evil But objective evil, that is to say, the evil that's in the object or in the act, is not the same as subjective culpability, right? So you can be more or less culpable for an act that remains objectively evil, right? We all know that. Even our law recognizes that, but certainly our consciences recognize that. So I guess I would agree with Matthew on the main. I would just sort of emphasize that people with power are more responsible than people with less. They're more culpable. I mean, if you have the capital, if you have the for-profit structure, if you have the investors, if you have the skill and the talent, if you have the good fortune to be able to make AI products, then you have greater responsibility. This is a Spider-Man line. I'm realizing this. You have greater responsibility than the person who is just consuming it. And even to the point where it's like, the way in which AI has simply been foisted on people already habituated to internet use makes me think that there's extremely little subjective culpability on the part of the user for what I would describe as irrational acts of speaking with and listening to non-people. I think we are at a moment in history where we're looking at making the world, and especially our own country, one that's really devoted to this being the form in which people live, the form in which they speak with each other, the form in which they research and learn and listen and entertain themselves. It's like we're going all in. And I think the people, states especially, and statesmen, and then designers especially, have a much higher degree of culpability and responsibility for the shape of the world they're in. That's always true, and that always weighs upon kings. People who are given kingship, who are given rule, know that they will face the wrath of God and his judgment and tremble, and they should, because they have the world in their hands in a way that most people don't. And that's awesome.
Thank you, Mark. And extra points for using the word foisted. Matthew, you started with your response to this, right?
I'm good.
Well, I just want to close. I'll give both of you a few minutes for closing remarks, but I just wanted to thank both of you for coming here. Obviously, this is uncharted territory. I think these conversations are so important for the church to be having, and for all of us to be having. I just want to remind listeners, the Faith in AI project exists to help people understand and navigate and harness AI. And this is exactly what we're hoping to do, is bring these conversations to many people, and to have smart people like yourselves come and really discuss these and discuss the implications and of these things. People that are listening, you can go to faithinaiproject.com to see more conversations like this. But for both of you, closing remarks, like if I think a lot in these conversations about our children, like our kids or our next generation, or the people we care about who are going to live beyond us. And at least that's where my mind goes when I think of closing remarks, is what's the takeaway here that we really are hoping that people walk away from this conversation with. So either of you that want to go first, feel free.
Can you ask, I'm trying to, the thing about kids, what do you mean?
Yeah, like what would your closing remarks at the end of this, if my son or daughter, 10 years from now pulls up this conversation and just skips to the end, they're like, I want Mark's closing remarks. I want his closing statement here. And Matthew, you as well. Mark, you kind of have the benefit of like, just read the title of my article. Like the closing remark is delete Magisterium AI. But I just want to give a opportunity for a closing statement.
Okay. Yeah. You're presuming in 10 years that any child would trust anything on the screen.
That's true. Okay. If we wrote a letter we wrote a letter and we said, don't open until.
Yeah. Something like that. Okay. Let me think. Matthew, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
It doesn't matter to me. I'm happy to go, but Mark, if you want to gather your thoughts, but if you feel you're good to go, shoot.
It's dangerously open waters.
I know. My apologies.
Look, no. I mean, there's something to it. I think that Christianity is real. I think Jesus Christ really came, really incarnated, really died, really rose, and that people saw it. And I think that that's not incidental, but the very heart of our faith. It's not teaching. It's not an idea. It is a person who did something for us, who saved us. God himself. And the form in which Christianity is then preached, I believe, should relate, be beautifully in harmony with what it is preaching. And because of this, I think that the idea of catechesis, of even theological research, of even advice seeking from unreal sources in which an experience is being faked for whatever reason, is contrary to the form, to the beauty of the faith. I think we should be a people whose every pronouncement of the love Jesus Christ has for us and for everyone, for the whole world, should put us on the line, should be courageous. And I don't care if it's the most mundane citation of an obscure council. I don't care if it's a quotation of Chrysostom that might work well on a bumper sticker, although it's unlikely. If it's revealing Jesus Christ, it should reveal it in accordance with the one who revealed himself, and that is really, personally, here, responsibly. I think that it is with great intentions that we look to the world of digital representation and say the church must be here. But I think that we cannot be on the digital continent as it's expressed in any other form but the one that Christ took when he visited us. We need to be like him. And I think a big part of that is risk. A big part of this courage. It's being willing to die. It's being behind your words in a way that makes you entirely responsible for them. So if anything, what I would say to people is to ask yourself what the Pope asked us to consider. What people are we becoming? What kind of people are we becoming in and through the technology we use? Is this form the kind that makes us a holy people, or is it a kind that makes us otherwise? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Matthew?
I think the message, and I've tried to say this on numerous occasions, is just to remember that we have agency here. I mean, 10 years from now, right, is in large part going to be shaped by the decisions we make now. Now, I don't operate any illusions that the world doesn't decide what it's going to do because the Pope, tells them. But I do think that we should work very hard to increase the influence of the Catholic Church because, quite frankly, I think that's the best way that we're going to arrive at an optimal outcome. So, and the only way that I think that we're going to find success is if we really focus on human intellectual and spiritual formation. I think this is critical. I think everything hinges on this. Human intellectual and spiritual formation, and of course, the evangelization. I wish we lived in a world in which I felt confident that there were enough Catholics out there who felt confident enough of their faith that they if someone came up and asked them a question, particularly a sticky one, that they'd feel confident answering. And I wish that were the world. And as I said in the beginning, if that was the world we lived in, I'd be doing something else. But it's not the world we're living in. And I like books, like the printing press, like the radio, like the TV. I consider artificial intelligence simply another tool, which can allow people to encounter basically the fathers, the doctors, the popes, all that wisdom and insight, the salvific message of the gospel. And I think we should be looking for every opportunity to ensure that message reaches people. I'm not saying it's a perfect tool, but I think it's a tool that we have, and I think it's a tool that's going to continue to become more and more powerful. And I think what I want to say is it's going to be very difficult to ensure that this tool is developed in a way that ensures that dignity is always front and center. And that means that all of us have to make sure that we have a role in this. It means that we have to shape our consciences around this technology. We have to ensure that our voice is heard. And as much as possible, ensuring that our bishops, and I would say even the Pope, are learning from our own experiences using it. Because, the Pope is not going to, it doesn't have a history of stepping up right as these techniques come out and just ruling yay or nay, adopt or reject. That's not usually the way these work. And as everyone knows, this age is moving faster than any age has in history. And if we want the Pope to be able to provide the wisdom and insight that we need, we have to provide as much good information as we possibly can about what the experience of using these technologies are. So I would just encourage everyone as much as they possibly can to get engaged in the conversation. And don't forget, again, the world that your children are going to live in is largely going to be shaped by the decisions that you make over the next few years.
Mr. Barnes, Mr. Sanders, thank you so much for this dialogue, for the conversation, for your voice, and for the work that you're doing. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah. Take care, guys.